She offered warmth for shelter, but the human gave her something greater asterisk. The wind howled through the pine trees like a wounded animal, carrying with it the promise of a storm that would bury the mountain roads until spring. Marcus pulled his worn jacket tighter as he stepped onto the cabin's front porch, the wooden boards creaking under his boots. 20 years of military service had taught him to read weather patterns. This one spelled trouble for anyone caught outside tonight. Generator hummed steadily behind the cabin, its familiar drone mixing with the symphony of approaching weather. Marcus had chosen this place specifically for its isolation. 3 hours from the nearest town, and accessible only by a winding dirt road that most people avoided even in good weather. After what he'd seen overseas, the solitude felt like medicine. For wounds that ran deeper than flesh, he was about to head back inside when something caught his eye through the swirling snow. A faint blue glow pulsed between the trees, too steady to be lightning, too soft to be artificial light. Marcus paused, his hand on the door handle, watching the strange illumination dance among the branches. His instincts honed by years of combat whispered warnings, but something else pulled at him. Curiosity he hadn't felt in years, grabbing his flashlight and emergency kit. Marcus followed the ethereal glow into the forest. The snow crunched beneath his feet as he navigated. Between towering pines, their branches heavy with fresh powder. The light grew stronger as he approached, revealing itself to be emanating from a small clearing where 2 figures huddled against the base of an enormous oak tree. The woman looked up as his footsteps approached, her eyes reflecting his flashlight beam like mirrors. Even in the dim light, Marcus could see she was unlike anyone he'd ever encountered. Her skin held a subtle luminescence, as if moonlight flowed through her veins, and her hair cascaded in waves of silver and deep blue. She wore what appeared to be the remnants of some kind of metallic fabric, torn and inadequate against the mountain cold. In her arms, she cradled a small child, perhaps 5 years old, whose features echoed her mother's otherworldly beauty. The little girl's breathing came in shallow puffs of vapor, her lips tinged blue with cold. Both were barefoot in the snow, yet somehow the woman's skin showed no signs of frostbite. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice carrying an accent Marcus couldn't place, musical and strange. "We have nowhere else to go." She shifted the child in her arms, and Marcus caught a glimpse of old bruises along her ribs, some faded yellow, others still dark purple. "If I warm your bed tonight, will you let us stay until the storm passes?" The desperation in her voice cut through Marcus like a blade. He'd heard that tone before, in war zones where people offered everything they had left just to survive another day. But there was something else in her eyes, a dignity that refused to be broken despite whatever had brought her to this moment. "You don't need to offer me anything," Marcus said softly, removing his jacket and wrapping it around her shoulders. The fabric seemed to dwarf her slight frame. "You both look like you could use some help, that's all." Da-da-da-da. The woman's eyes widened. With surprise, as if kindness without conditions was a foreign concept, she allowed him to help her to her feet, moving with a grace that seemed to defy the deep snow and her obvious exhaustion. The child stirred in her arms, opening eyes that held an intelligence far beyond her apparent years. "What are your names?" Marcus asked as they walked toward his cabin, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness ahead of them. "I am Naya," the woman replied after a moment's hesitation. "This is my daughter, Kira." She paused, then added quietly, "We are grateful for your kindness, though you may come to regret it." Marcus glanced at her sideways as they approached the warm glow of his cabin windows. "Why would I regret helping someone in need?" Naya's grip tightened on her daughter, and she looked up at the star-filled sky visible through breaks in the storm clouds. "Because we are not what we appear to be," she whispered, "and those who hunt us will not stop until they find us." As they reached the cabin's front steps, Marcus held the door open, warm air spilling out into the cold night. He watched as Naya hesitated on the threshold, as if crossing it would change everything for all of them. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped under the weight of snow, the sound echoing through the forest like a warning. But Marcus had made his choice the moment he saw them in the clearing. Whatever secrets Naya carried, whatever dangers followed in her wake, he would. Face them as he had faced everything else in his life. With determination and the quiet strength that had carried him through darker nights than this, morning came with the soft whisper of snow against the cabin windows, the storm having spent its fury during the night. Marcus woke to unfamiliar sounds from the main room, a gentle humming that seemed to vibrate through the wooden walls themselves. He dressed quickly and emerged from his bedroom to find Naya kneeling by the fireplace, her hands moving in slow, deliberate patterns over the dying embers. The fire responded to her touch, flames dancing higher without any apparent fuel being added. Kira sat cross-legged nearby, her small hands pressed against the wooden floor, eyes closed in concentration. As Marcus watched, frost that had formed on the inside of the windows began to melt in perfect circles, the ice crystals dissolving into dewdrops that caught the morning light like tiny prisms. "Good morning," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle them. Naya turned, luminescent skin more pronounced in the daylight streaming through the windows. "We did not mean to wake you," she said, rising gracefully to her feet. "Kira was cold, and I was trying to help the fire." Marcus looked at the hearth, where flames now burned steadily without any logs having been added since the night before. "That's quite a talent," he said carefully. A shadow crossed Naya's face. "Where we come from, such things are not unusual." She moved to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered landscape. "But here, on your world, we have learned that being different can be dangerous." "Your world?" Marcus repeated, though somehow the words didn't surprise him as much as they should have. Nahai was quiet for a long moment, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. Kira continued her humming, the sound growing more complex, harmonious in ways that human vocal cords shouldn't have been able to produce. As she sang, the few houseplants Marcus kept began to straighten, their leaves unfurling as if touched by spring sunlight. "We are refugees," Naya finally said, turning back to face him. "Our ship was damaged in what you might call a battle." "Crashed in your mountains 3 days ago?" She gestured toward Kira. "My daughter's abilities allow her to commune with living things, to encourage growth and healing. It is why our enemies wanted to capture her, to use her gifts for their own purposes." Marcus absorbed this information, surprised by how readily he accepted it. Perhaps his years of military service had prepared him for the impossible, or perhaps there was something about Naya's honesty that made doubt seem foolish. "What happened to your ship?" "Destroyed in the crash," Naya replied, "along with any hope of contacting others of our kind." She moved closer to him, her eyes searching his face. "You should know that, by helping us, you may have put yourself in danger. There are those among your people who serve our enemies, who watch for signs of our presence." As if summoned by her words, the distant sound of helicopter rotors began to echo through the valley. Marcus moved to the window, squinting against the morning glare as he spotted the aircraft moving in a search pattern over the forest. Naya grabbed Kira, pulling the child close, as her skin began to dim, the luminescence fading until she looked almost human. "They found the crash site," Naya whispered, fear evident in her voice for the first time. Marcus watched the helicopter circle closer to his property. "How long before they reach us?" "Not long," Naya said. "The metal in our ship creates a unique electromagnetic signature. They will follow it here eventually." Kira tugged at her mother's torn garment, whispering something in a language that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Naya nodded and looked at Marcus with an expression that held both gratitude and sorrow. "We should go," she said. "We have already brought too much trouble to your peaceful life." Marcus turned from the window, his jaw set with determination.
Where would you go?"
"You said yourself that your ship was destroyed." "There are others," Naya said hopefully. "Other survivors scattered across your world. If we can find them, perhaps together we can find a way to know," Marcus interrupted. "You're not going anywhere, not while you're being hunted." He moved to a closet and began pulling out camping gear, his movements efficient and purposeful. "I've spent 20 years learning how to disappear when I need to. But if they want to find you, they'll have to go through me first." Naya stared at him in amazement. "Why would you risk everything for strangers?" Marcus paused in his preparations, meeting her luminous gaze. Because sometimes strangers are the only family we have left, he said quietly. And because I haven't felt this alive in years. The helicopter sounds grew louder, and Marcus could see figures rappelling down ropes into the forest clearing, where Naya's ship had crashed. Time was running out, but as he looked at this woman and child who had stumbled into his isolated life, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his military days, a sense of purpose that went beyond his own. Survival. The abandoned mineshaft carved into the mountainside had provided perfect shelter for 3 days, its depths hiding them from the search teams that combed the forest above. Marcus had discovered the entrance years ago during one of his solitary hikes, never imagining he would someday use it as a refuge for beings from another world. An AIA sat near the small fire Marcus had built, using dry wood and careful ventilation. Kira curled in her lap, sleeping peacefully. The child's abilities had proven invaluable during their flight from the cabin, allowing them to calm aggressive wildlife and encouraging edible plants to grow along their path. But the constant use of her gifts was exhausting for someone so young. She's remarkable, Marcus said softly, adding another piece of wood to the fire. Both of you are. Naya's fingers combed gently through her daughter's hair, the silver strands catching the firelight. On our world, such abilities were common among our people. We lived in harmony with all living things, our cities grown rather than built, our technology powered by the natural forces of life itself. Her voice carried a note of longing that made Marcus's chest tighten. What happened? He asked, settling beside them on the makeshift bedding he'd created from sleeping bags and pine boughs. Fear, Naya replied simply. Those in power became afraid of what they could not control. They decided that our gifts made us too dangerous to exist freely. She looked up at him, her luminous eyes reflecting the dancing flames. Sound familiar? Marcus nodded grimly. He'd seen enough of human nature during his military service to understand how quickly fear could turn to persecution. Is that why? You were traveling together as refugees? Dozens of ships, Naya confirmed. Families, children, elders, all fleeing to find sanctuary among the stars. We thought we could find a world where we could live in peace. She shifted Kira more comfortably in her arms. Instead, we found ourselves scattered across a planet where we must hide what we are to survive. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the rough stone walls. Marcus found himself studying Naya's profile, the elegant curve of her neck, the way her skin seemed to glow with its own inner light. Over the past few days, he'd watched her tend to her daughter with infinite patience, seen her courage in the face of impossible odds, witnessed the gentle way she interacted with every living thing they encountered. You don't have to hide from me, he said quietly. Naya turned to look at him, surprise flickering across her features. You say that now, but you don't truly know what I am, what Kira is capable of when her abilities fully develop. Then show me, Marcus challenged gently. NAIA hesitated, then carefully moved Kira to lie on the soft bedding. She rose and walked to the cave entrance where moonlight filtered through the opening. Placing her hands against the cold stone walls, she closed her eyes and began to hum. The same haunting melody Kira had produced back at the cabin. The effect was immediate and breathtaking. Luminescent moss began to spread across the cave walls, like liquid starlight, providing a soft, warm glow that filled their shelter with ethereal beauty. Flowers Marcus had never seen before pushed through cracks in the stone, petals shimmering with colors that seemed to shift and change in the gentle light. But it was Naya herself who took his breath away. Her skin brightened until she seemed to be carved from moonbeams, her hair flowing as if moved by an unfelt breeze. When she opened her eyes, they blazed with the light of distant stars, and Marcus felt as if he were looking at the embodiment of life itself. This is who I am, she whispered, vulnerability clear in her voice despite her radiant appearance. This is what your people would fear, what they would cage or destroy if they knew. Marcus rose and walked toward her, his movements slow and deliberate. Naya tensed as he approached, as if expecting rejection or worse. Instead, he reached out and gently touched her cheek. his fingers tracing the path of light that seemed to flow beneath her skin. "You're beautiful," he said simply. Tears gathered in Naya's luminous eyes. "Marcus, you don't understand. If you stay with us, if you continue to help us, there will be no going back to your quiet life. They will hunt you as they hunt us."
Good.
Marcus replied, surprising them both with the firmness in his voice. "I was tired of hiding anyway." Before Naya could respond, he leaned forward and kissed her, tasting starlight and hope on her lips. She melted into his embrace, her luminescence flaring brighter as if his touch had awakened something that had been dormant for too long. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing heavily, the air between them charged with possibility and desire. "We come from different worlds," Naya whispered against his lips. "Maybe that's exactly what we both needed," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. "Someone who could show us there's more to existence than just surviving." Outside their luminous cave, the search helicopters continued their patrol. But for the first time since crash landing on Earth, Naya felt something other than fear. In Marcus's arms, surrounded by the gentle light of her own making, she dared to hope that perhaps they had found something worth more than mere survival, something worth fighting for. The sound of boots crunching through snow reached them just after dawn, accompanied by the sharp bark of tracking dogs. Marcus was instantly awake, his military training kicking in as he assessed their situation. Through the cave entrance, he could see armed figures moving systematically through the forest, their search pattern tightening around the mineshaft's location. "They found us," Naya whispered, gathering Kira into her arms. The child was still drowsy, her small hands glowing faintly as she instinctively reached for her mother's comfort. Marcus moved to his pack, retrieving weapons he'd hoped never to use again. "There's another way out through the back of the cave." "System," he said, checking his rifle with practiced efficiency. "It connects to a series of tunnels that lead down to the valley." "Marcus, no," Naya said, reading his intentions in his movements. "You cannot fight them all. There are too many." "I don't need to fight them all," Marcus replied grimly. "I just need to buy you enough time to escape." Naya placed Kira gently on the bedding and stood, her skin beginning to brighten with determination. "We run together or not at all," she said firmly. "I will not lose someone else I care about to this war." The emotion in her voice stopped Marcus cold. He turned to look at her, seeing not just the ethereal being who had stumbled into his life, but a woman who had already lost too much, who was willing to risk everything rather than watch him sacrifice himself for her safety. "Together then," he agreed, slinging his pack over his shoulders. They moved quickly through the deeper passages of the mine, Kira riding piggyback on Marcus while Naya used her abilities to encourage moss growth along the walls, providing light for their escape. Behind them, shouts echoed through the tunnels as their pursuers discovered the abandoned camp. The passage narrowed as they descended, forcing them to move single file through spaces that hadn't seen human presence in decades. Marcus led the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead, while Naya brought up the rear, her natural luminescence helping to light their path. "Daddy Marcus," Kira whispered, using the name she'd started calling him the day before. "The stones are singing." Marcus paused, listening carefully. Above the sound of their own movement, he could hear a faint humming resonating through the rock walls around them. "What does that mean?" he asked Naya. "There are others nearby," Naya replied, hope and caution warring in her voice. "Other survivors. Kira can sense them through the earth itself."
Ow.
They emerged from the tunnel system into a hidden valley Marcus had never seen before, despite years of exploring these mountains. Ancient trees grew in impossible spirals, their branches intertwining to form natural bridges across a crystal-clear stream. The air itself seemed to shimmer with the same energy Marcus had grown accustomed to feeling around Naya and Kira, and they were not alone. Figures moved among the twisted trees, beings who shared Naya's luminescent skin and otherworldly grace. As Marcus and his companions approached, the refugees turned to greet them, their faces showing a mixture of relief and wariness at seeing a human among them. Naya, a tall male with features similar to hers, stepped forward. "We felt Kira's presence, but feared it might be a trap." Naya breathed, rushing forward to embrace him. I thought you were lost with the others. 12 ships made it down intact, Ren explained, his eyes never leaving Marcus. We've been gathering survivors, but it's dangerous. The humans have technology that can track our energy signatures. Not all humans, Naya said firmly, moving back to Marcus's side. This is Marcus. He saved us, protected us when he could have turned us over to those who hunt us. Ren studied Marcus with ancient eyes that seemed to weigh his soul. And what do you want in return for this protection, human? Nothing, Marcus replied honestly, except maybe the chance to help you find somewhere safe to call home. Before Ren could respond, the sharp crack of gunfire echoed through the valley. Shouts rang out as armed soldiers poured from the tree line, their weapons trained on the gathered refugees. Marcus recognized the tactical formation immediately. These weren't government agents. They were mercenaries, the kind who asked no questions and left no witnesses. Everyone down, Marcus shouted, returning fire as he positioned himself between the attackers and the refugees. Naya grabbed Kira, her skin flaring brightly as she called out in her native tongue. Around the valley, the ancient trees began to respond, their branches weaving together to form natural barriers. But there were too many soldiers, and they had come prepared for supernatural resistance. Devices attached to their weapons sparked with electricity that seemed to disrupt the refugees' abilities, causing several to collapse as their connection to the living world was severed. Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Naya. Beside him, her eyes blazing with fury and determination. I will not run anymore, she said. If we are to make our stand, let it be here, together. Around them, the battle raged as refugees and soldiers clashed in a conflict that would determine not just their immediate survival, but the future of two worlds learning to coexist. Marcus reached for Naya's hand, their fingers intertwining. As they faced the impossible odds together, love and courage their only weapons against those who would tear them apart. The battle for the Hidden Valley lasted 3 days. But when the smoke finally cleared, it was the refugees who stood victorious. Naya's ability to communicate with the ancient forest had turned the very earth against their attackers, while Kira's growing powers had healed the wounded and strengthened their defenders. Beyond human limitations, Marcus sat by the stream that ran through the center of the valley, watching as Naya worked with the other survivors to tend to their makeshift settlement. In the weeks following their victory, more refugee ships had been located, their occupants drawn by the same energy signatures that Kira could sense through the planet's living network. You're thinking too hard again, Naya said, settling beside him on the mossy bank. Her luminescence had grown brighter since reuniting with her people, as if being among her own kind had recharged something fundamental within her. Just trying to process everything, Marcus admitted. A month ago, my biggest concern was whether the generator would last through winter. Now I'm part of an alien refugee community that's reshaping an entire ecosystem. Naya laughed, the sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Are you having second thoughts about your decision to help us? Marcus turned to look at her, taking in the way moonlight seemed to flow through her skin, the gentle glow that surrounded her like a second presence. Never, he said firmly. Though I have to ask what happens now. The government knows you're here. Sooner or later, they'll send more people. Perhaps, Naya agreed. But we are no longer defenseless refugees running blindly through the stars. We have found allies among your people, those who believe in coexistence rather than conquest. Gestured toward the settlement, where human volunteers worked alongside alien refugees to build something entirely new. Kira ran past them, laughing as she chased butterfly-like creatures that glowed with their own inner light. Other refugee children followed behind her, their abilities manifesting in displays of natural magic that would have been impossible on their war-torn homeworld. Watching them play, Marcus felt a profound sense of hope he hadn't experienced. In years, she's happy here, he observed. She has never known such freedom, Naya replied. On our world, children with her gifts were either feared or coveted. Here, she can simply be herself. She paused, then added quietly, we all can. As if summoned by their conversation, Kira bounded over to them, her small face flushed with excitement. Mama, Daddy, Marcus. Look what Ren taught me." She placed her tiny hands against the ground, and immediately flowers began to bloom in intricate patterns around them, their petals shifting through colors that existed nowhere else in nature. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," Marcus said, lifting Kira onto his lap. Over the past month, the distinction between his feelings for Naya and his growing love for her daughter had blurred until he couldn't imagine his life without either of them. "When I grow up, I want to make gardens for everyone," Kira announced, with the confidence only children possessed. "Gardens that grow on every world, so no one ever has to be hungry or sad." Naya met Marcus's eyes over their daughter's head, both thinking the same thing. In Kira's innocent dreams lay the seeds of something unprecedented. A future where the barriers between species dissolved into collaboration and mutual growth. "Would you like that?" Naya asked Marcus softly. "A future where Kira's gardens span the stars?" Marcus considered the question seriously. The old him would have been terrified by such cosmic ambitions, content to live quietly in his isolated cabin. But the man he had become, shaped by love and purpose he never expected to find, felt only excitement at the possibilities ahead. "I think," he said slowly, "that the universe could use a few more gardeners like Kira." He wrapped his arms around both of them, feeling the warmth of Naya's luminescence and the bright potential of the child they were raising together. "And I can't think of anywhere I'd rather be than helping her plant those seeds." Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. But for the first time in generations, they looked down on a world where two species had chosen love over fear, cooperation over conquest. In a hidden valley where impossible trees grew and refugee children played games of light and wonder. The future was being written by those brave enough to believe that home was not a place you came from, but something you built with the people you chose to love. The war that had scattered Naya's people across the galaxy was far from over. But in this sanctuary they had created together, surrounded by the luminous proof that different worlds could not only coexist, but flourish together. Marcus knew they had found something worth more than survival. They'd found hope itself growing. Wild and free under alien stars that no longer seemed quite so foreign after all,